former director of the Office of Management and Budget and NewsNation political contributor, Mick Mulvaney. Always great to have you here on the weekend. We appreciate it.
Thanks, as always, for having me.
All right, Mick. So given your experience overseeing federal budgets and economic policy, you've got a nice resume. How would you compare the key differences between Trump's focus on tax cuts, deregulation, and domestic manufacturing, and Harris's emphasis on middle-class tax relief, green energy jobs, and addressing income inequality? All of that was discussed this week. How do you see it?
Yeah, it was a busy week for economic policy, which someone like me loves, but, and granted, being a Republican, I would tend to gravitate more to Donald Trump's policies. But I'm probably in the minority, or at least not in the majority of people who are just now coming to the race, the people who are just now making up their minds. Are folks, keep in mind, who the undecided voters are undecided for a reason. They don't pay attention until very late. So it's one of the reasons you probably saw this policy dump from both sides, trying to get people to sort of engage. My guess is, if you care enough about tax policy to sort of allow it to impact your decision making, you've already made a decision. That's why the candidates they're not doing policy speeches today. They're at football games. I mean, Donald Trump is in Alabama for the Georgia-Alabama game because Georgia is a swing state. Pretty easy for him to go down to Alabama and root for Georgia, which is probably what he should do. Now, Tim Walz has got a problem because he's from Minnesota, and he's going to the Minnesota game at Michigan. He doesn't need any votes in Minnesota. He needs votes in Michigan. So I'm not sure how the governor of Minnesota goes to Ann Arbor to root for Michigan, but we'll see if Tim can pull that off.
Interesting point. And Mick, you know what? I used to work in talk radio, and I remember sitting in our newsroom talking with our host, and as we were talking about really heavy topic matters, my news director used to say, you've got topic glaze, meaning that people are talking, but they're not really listening. They're not picking up what people are putting down. So all this talk about the economics, I just wonder how much it's sinking in. You know, as Trump is ready to speak at his rally in Wisconsin, which of his specific economic messages do you think he'll focus on that will actually resonate with voters in a state that has seen significant shifts in manufacturing and agriculture? And just, you know, you've got to think about what is it going to stick?
Yeah, listen, when you're inside the Beltway, people love details. They love policy. They love sort of the nuts and bolts of your tax policy versus mine. When you get out to ordinary human beings, which is what the rest of the world and the country is, the simpler message is usually the best. It's the high-level message. It's, listen, I used to be president. This is what I would be saying if I'm Donald Trump. I was president for 4 years. She's been vice president for 4 years. Which of those 4-year periods treated you better economically? Were you better off economically when I was president or when she was vice president? That, I think, is a winning message, and that's what I think you'll see Trump doing. Yeah, the team will put out exactly what you're showing there now, you know, details that run articles in financial journals. The Wall Street Journal will do a breakdown of various pieces and parts of both economic policies. But if you're going to a rally, or if you're just tuning in now, there's an axiom in this business, which is that people don't remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel. So who's going to make them feel better about the next 4 years, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? I think that's the critical message that both of them are going to try to be looking for here in the last month of the campaign.
That is such an important point you just made, how to make people feel, because that's what they're going to remember, right? You know, Harris has been stressing the importance of supporting the middle class and entrepreneurs. So as we zoom out on that, how do you assess the long-term sustainability of Trump's economic policies in relation to job growth and wage increases for middle-class families? How does that matter?
You know, look, I take a different approach to it. I think it's a rational approach. Let me see if I can explain it very quickly. I look at the regulatory policies as more of an insight into someone's heart and soul on government oversight and policy than what you might say, oh, I'm for the middle class. Who's not for the middle class? You know, I'm for the little guy. Everybody's for the little guy. I want to lower your taxes and increase your government handouts. Everybody wants to do that. How do you look at regulation? The Biden-Harris team has really ramped up regulation in the last 4 years, whereas Trump, for the first time in 40 years, really focused on deregulation. I think that had a major influence in inflation. If inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. If you can make it easier to get stuff to market, prices will stay low, and that's what deregulation does. Regulating makes it harder to do that. And you can say, look, I've got this policy that helps you, I've got this policy that helps that. But when you're regulating a market and making it harder for goods and services to get to people's houses, that's bad for the middle class. It's bad for everybody. So that's what I look at. As a Republican, I sort of like Donald Trump's deregulation a lot more than Harris's re-regulation.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.